Hey guys, this is TrickShot726, and this is part 2 of 6 in my mini-series talking about how to improve your stop-motion animated videos. This community has grown a ton in the 9 years I've been making animation, and I figured it's time I gave back and helped foster more of that growth. So this is episode 2 in my stop-motion how-to series, and this is how to animate, the animation basics. Today we're going to be talking about how to animate your videos. So for starters, the more frames you add to a movement, the smoother and the slower it becomes. Most movies are filmed at 24 frames per second, which means you need to take a whole lot of pictures to get your videos looking that smooth. But don't be discouraged if you're really interested in becoming a stop motion animator. Hopefully this mini-series will help you out. So before we get started on stop motion specifically, there are 12 basic principles to animation that you should know. They're squash and stretch, anticipation, follow through, secondary action, exaggeration, straight ahead versus pose to pose, staging, arc, slow in, slow out, timing, solid line, and appeal. While they're all super important to learn and understand, I'm only going to be going over a couple of these in depth since they relate more to stop motion specifically. If you're really interested in hearing about all the principles in depth, I've linked a video from Alan Becker Tutorials in the description below. He does a great job of explaining each one and the importance very well, so I would recommend checking that out as well. Super interesting, super helpful, very important. All right, so the first two that I'm going to be talking about is anticipation and follow through, and they kind of really go hand in hand. To make your animation more convincing, you should have your characters anticipate and follow through on their actions. So let's say we're going to have Spider-Man throw a punch at the Green Goblin, right? In this first example, he punches Green Goblin, and it doesn't look very convincing. It doesn't seem to have that much power behind it. In the second example, though, he winds up his punch, and his arm follows through on the punch after he makes contact. This makes it seem a little bit more realistic and like it has more power behind it as well. Obviously, you won't want every hit to look as telegraphed as this, but you can act out smaller and quicker jabs yourself, and you'll notice your body does anticipate and follow through in your actions as well. And that's the realism that we're trying to capture in your animation. Something else that I think is important to talk about that I don't think a lot of people do is when you're doing like punching scenes and stuff, you know, you've got the articulation on the figure. This one thankfully has like a butterfly joint and stuff, and he's got the ball joint here. Obviously, I'm not doing a full review of Spider-Man, but when I punch it up, his ball joint is pointed forward like this when he's punching, but when he goes back, you're limited. Like he can only go that far back. Usually what I end up doing, because the frames are going by fast, and usually if it's like this, you're not going to see that joint anyways, is turn the joint the other way. Hang on, come on, camera, focus. Thank you. So normally the joint's down, turn the joint back, you're going to get a lot more range if you go this way, you know, than if you do it just like that. Like, yes, technically if he was a human, his arm would not be able to completely unhinge his shoulder and spin it around, but these aren't humans, and humans can move farther back than the action figures can anyways, right? You're trying to simulate the action. Like this, you can't tell what the joint is. You just see that his arm's going back. So if you really want to wind it up, you know, have him pull back, not like that with the other arm, but you know what I'm saying? Like you get like wind back, and then as it's coming forward like this, when you get to about there, the joint's going to stop. You can move it forward a little bit more, but now you're limited again. So then, since this is stop motion and you don't have to film everything half a second after the first one, you can take time in between shots to reconfigure things, twist the joint, pull it back all the way, you know, you can meet it where the last pose stopped or a little bit ahead of it, you know, and continue on. So his arm is moving more than what you would be with just using the joint one way. You know, be creative with things like that, of use the figure's full range of motion, and don't limit yourself to what you are able to do with where the joints currently are, especially if they're posing with like their back arm. If you do it this way, obviously people are going to notice it. If you go like that and then you swap it, you're going to go like, you know, like that. You could see the webbing and the blue move a little bit, but when you do it quickly, it's not going to be very noticeable. People aren't going to be paying attention to that specifically. Now they are going to be looking at all my past videos, but like you can fudge things like that a little bit to help sell your shots. I'll talk more about shots and framing in future installments and future sections, but that's something I think is important to talk about that no one really has. But I'm pretty sure other animators do it as well. If not, that's a trick shot original right there. uh, but yeah, use your figure's full articulation to help your animation and help it give that more realistic or more exaggerated feel to it. You want to use all the resources you have available to you. Next, let's talk about secondary action. Secondary action is any movement that occurs in tandem with the primary action. So if we look at that Spider-Man clip again, we can see his other arm is moving while he's punching as well. If you go through the motion of punching yourself, you'll notice that the rest of your body isn't just stiff, but it's moving as well. Adding secondary actions like this will go a long way to help increasing the believability of your videos as well. I'm going to fly through this next one really quick. Straight ahead versus pose to pose are two methods of animating, but it's largely used for 2D and 3D animation. Pose to pose has the animator go through and add keyframes of the major poses in the action before going back and adding all the smaller frames in between. This helps the animation from changing sizes when you're drawing it or missing its endpoint of if you want it to end at a specific spot in the frame. Helps keep you where you want to be. Straight ahead is when the animator just draws each frame consecutively and animates it that way. Just straight ahead. For stop motion, pose to pose creates more of a challenge because you'd have to go back and add frames in between. It's doable if you have like dragon frame or something with like onion skinning, but even then I think it would just create more of a hassle for you. So just straight ahead is the way to do it for stop motion. Next up is staging. You could have the best animated and choreographed fight ever, but if the audience can't really see what's going on, it's kind of pointless and you're putting a lot of work into something no one's going to be able to tell you put work into. Staging is just about making sure the audience can clearly see and follow and track what you want them to. This doesn't mean everything should be in the center of the frame at all time. That would be super boring. That's not to say you can't surprise your audience and purposely hide some information. You can still surprise them by having your characters react to something off screen. But in that case, your character's reaction is the audience's focal point. Whatever's off screen is inconsequential until it comes back on screen. So that's something really important to notice. Whatever you want people to be looking at, that's what you need to make it clear. A good rule of thumb I use, and just take this with a grain of salt, it's not something you have to live and die by, is just try and make sure their face is visible. Whenever I have like someone punching, I try and have it at an angle where when their arm swings across their body, it doesn't cover their face. That usually just means changing the angle a little bit higher or to the left or something like that to make sure that we can still see their face, but it helps out a lot. Rule of thirds, also really important. Usually cameras have a thing where you can put like a grid on it. It's like a third grid. And any of the corners that you'll see right here, that's usually where you want to face, usually the upper ones. We could go into that a lot more, but I'm flying through these real quick. So that is the basic idea with that. The next principle pairs really well with staging. It's timing. You want to make sure you give your audience time to absorb what's happening on screen. If you overlap too many actions at once, it can make things seem too busy and hard to follow and not really give the audience a chance to see what is going on where. Giving each beat a chance to breathe will make it easier for the audience to follow the main action, even as it swaps between characters or anything like that. So that's what you really want to make sure you do. If you just move at breakneck speed, you're going to lose people. And lastly, I'm going to be talking about slow in and slow out. This principle talks about how objects don't start moving with full momentum and they usually don't stop moving immediately. Adding more frames at the beginning and the end of an action will help show how your character takes a second to reach their top speed or come to a complete stop. And those are the animating principles I feel are the most important to stop motion animation. Like I said before, definitely worth checking out the video from Alan Becker Tutorials on all 12 of the animation principles and focusing on all of those as well. Tune in next time to hear me give you more tips on how to choreograph your videos as well. In the meantime, check out some of my previous videos or check out the first episode if you haven't seen that already. But I will catch you guys next time. See ya!